The first signs appeared on a Tuesday morning when every radio telescope on Earth suddenly went silent. Dr. Sarah Chen was reviewing stellar data at the Arecibo Observatory when the screens flickered and died. Within minutes, her secure phone buzzed with calls from colleagues across 6 continents, all reporting the same phenomenon. "It's not equipment failure," whispered Dr. Marcus Webb from the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. His voice carried a tremor that Sarah had never heard before. Every single array, every satellite dish, every deep space monitoring station just stopped receiving. But here's the strange part. They're still detecting something. Something big. Sarah's blood ran cold as she checked her backup instruments. The electromagnetic signature was unlike anything in their databases. It wasn't random cosmic noise or solar interference. The pattern was too organized, too deliberate. It pulsed with mathematical precision, creating a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat across the void of space. Within hours, the world's most brilliant minds gathered virtually in emergency sessions. The Pentagon's top brass joined physicists from CERN, while astronomers from Tokyo to Johannesburg shared their readings. The conclusion was unanimous and terrifying. Something massive was approaching Earth from beyond the outer planets. General Patricia Stone, head of the newly formed Extraterrestrial Defense Initiative, addressed the assembled scientists with military precision. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are no longer alone. Our deep space monitors have detected a fleet of objects moving at impossible speeds toward our solar system. Based on their trajectory and velocity, they will reach Earth's orbit in 72 hours. The room fell silent except for the hum of computer servers processing endless streams of data. Sarah found herself gripping the edge of the conference table as images flashed across the main screen. The objects were enormous, each one roughly the size of Manhattan, their surfaces reflecting no light yet somehow visible against the star field. "What do they want?" asked Dr. Elena Vasquez, the lead xenobiologist from Madrid. Her question hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implications that none of them wanted to consider. The answer came 18 hours later, broadcast simultaneously on every television channel, radio frequency, and internet connection on the planet. The message was brief, delivered in perfect English, Mandarin, Spanish, Arabic, and dozens of other languages by voices that sounded eerily human, yet carried an undertone of something ancient and cold. "Humans of Earth, you have been judged unworthy to continue your expansion beyond this world. Your species demonstrates excessive aggression, environmental destruction, and technological recklessness. We are the hegemony, guardians of galactic order. You have 72 hours to cease all space-related activities and submit to containment protocols. Resistance will result in immediate planetary sterilization." The world erupted into chaos. Stock markets crashed, governments scrambled to emergency sessions, and millions of people flooded the streets in panic or prayer. Social media exploded with theories, fears, and desperate attempts at humor in the face of extinction. Some demanded immediate surrender. Others called for nuclear strikes against the approaching fleet. But in a classified facility beneath the mountains of Colorado, a different kind of conversation was taking place. Admiral James Harrison, commander of the Combined Global Defense Force, stood before a holographic display showing Earth's pathetically inadequate defenses. 36 nuclear submarines, a handful of orbital weapons platforms, and maybe 200 functional fighter aircraft that could theoretically reach the edge of space. "Sir," said Colonel Martinez, his tactical advisor, "even if we launched everything we have, our weapons couldn't scratch their hull plating. These ships are operating with technology centuries beyond our capabilities." Harrison's jaw tightened as he studied the tactical readout. The alien vessels had already demonstrated their superiority by effortlessly disabling Earth's satellite network without firing a shot. They had simply transmitted a signal that fried every circuit board in orbit, leaving the planet blind and defenseless. "Maybe we can't hurt their ships," Harrison said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of desperate determination. "But we're not going down without a fight. Contact Dr. Elizabeth Warren at MIT. I want her theoretical physics team working on any weakness we can exploit. And get me every military engineer who's ever dreamed of building something impossible." Meanwhile, in laboratories around the world, a different kind of resistance was forming. Dr. Chen had joined forces with a brilliant young programmer named Alex Rodriguez, whose specialty was quantum computing algorithms. Together, they were developing something the aliens hadn't expected: a way to turn humanity's own chaotic nature into a weapon. "Look at this," Alex said, pointing to lines of code scrolling across his screen. "Their ships operate on predictable quantum frequencies. But human technology is built on randomness, on chaotic variables that even we don't fully understand. If we can introduce enough unpredictability into their systems..." Sarah leaned forward, her mind racing through the implications. "You're talking about using our own technological inconsistencies as a virus, making our primitive randomness toxic to their advanced order." The plan was audacious and probably suicidal. It would require coordinating every remaining piece of human technology on the planet, from personal computers to industrial control systems. Every smartphone, every car computer, every digital device would need to broadcast a specific signal at precisely the same moment. As the alien deadline approached, something unexpected began happening in cities around the world. Instead of surrendering or fleeing in panic, ordinary people started gathering in public squares with their devices. Word spread through social networks faster than any government could control it. Teenagers in Tokyo, farmers in Kansas, factory workers in Mumbai, all united by a simple message that appeared simultaneously on every screen. "Humanity doesn't kneel. We fight." The final hours ticked away as the alien fleet took position around Earth. Their ships cast shadows across entire continents, blotting out the sun with their massive hulls. But on the surface, 8 billion humans stood ready with their phones, tablets, and computers in hand, waiting for a signal that would either save their species or mark their final act of defiance against an uncaring universe. The countdown reached zero at exactly 3:47 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Across every time zone, in every corner of the world, 8 billion humans pressed send on their devices simultaneously. The cacophony of signals that erupted from Earth's surface was unlike anything the universe had ever witnessed. A chaotic symphony of human ingenuity, desperation, and raw stubborn will. The effect was immediate and devastating to the alien fleet. The hegemony ships, which had operated for millennia on principles of perfect order and mathematical precision, suddenly found their systems flooded with pure randomness. Every quantum processor aboard their vessels began receiving contradictory data streams that defied their logical frameworks. High Admiral Vextar, commander of the hegemony fleet, watched in growing alarm as his flagship's control systems flickered and sparked. The beings known as the hegemony had conquered 300 worlds using the same methodical approach. Overwhelming technological superiority coupled with logical intimidation. No species had ever resisted with such disorder. "Report," Vextar commanded, his crystalline voice echoing through the ship's neural network. His species communicated through shared consciousness, making individual thought almost impossible. They were the perfect collective, unified in purpose and action. "Sir, we're receiving impossible data," reported Technical Administrator Zillan. "The humans are broadcasting mathematical equations that don't resolve, quantum states that exist in multiple forms simultaneously, and digital signals that seem to contradict basic physical laws." What the hegemony didn't understand was that human technology had evolved through trial and error, built by individuals with different ideas working in isolation, creating systems that were beautifully imperfect. Every smartphone contained thousands of small inefficiencies and random variables that somehow worked together in ways their designers never fully understood. On Earth's surface, Dr. Chen monitored the chaos from her makeshift command center in an abandoned subway station beneath New York City. Alex Rodriguez sat beside her, fingers flying across his keyboard as he coordinated the global signal bombardment. Around them, volunteers from dozens of nations worked frantically to maintain the transmission. "It's working," Alex shouted over the sound of air raid sirens echoing from the streets above. "Their ships are starting to drift out of formation. Whatever they're using for navigation can't handle our random number generators." The hegemony fleet began to experience something unprecedented in their million-year history. Confusion. Their ships, designed to operate as extensions of their collective consciousness, started making independent decisions. Some vessels attempted to retreat while others moved closer to Earth's surface. The perfect coordination that had made them invincible was dissolving into chaos, but the humans weren't done yet. Phase 2 of the desperate plan had been developing in secret facilities around the world. If the signal bombardment could disrupt their systems, then perhaps more direct action could exploit those weaknesses. Captain Maria Santos piloted her modified F-22 Raptor through the atmosphere toward the closest alien vessel. Her fighter had been hastily equipped with every piece of outdated, malfunctioning technology the military could find. Her radio played 3 different stations simultaneously. Her navigation system displayed coordinates from 17 different mapping satellites, and her weapon systems operated on software that hadn't been updated in 15 years. "Santos to ground control," she transmitted, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was attempting. "Beginning attack run on the nearest target. If this doesn't work, tell my kids their mom went out fighting." Her missiles struck the alien hull with surprisingly effective results, not because of their explosive power, but because each warhead contained dozens of civilian electronic devices, old cell phones, broken tablets, malfunctioning garage door openers, all broadcasting random signals at point-blank range. The hegemony ship's hull, designed to absorb and redirect energy attacks, couldn't process the chaotic electromagnetic noise. Systems that had operated flawlessly for centuries began shutting down in self-defense, trying to protect themselves from what they perceived as a virus of pure disorder. Across the globe, similar attacks were taking place. Submarines launched torpedoes filled with defunct electronics. Artillery units fired shells packed with broken radios and obsolete computers. Every piece of human technology that had ever malfunctioned or operated inefficiently was now a weapon against an enemy that demanded perfection. The turning point came when a teenage hacker named Jenny Kim, working from her bedroom in Seoul, discovered something remarkable. While monitoring the alien communications networks, she realized that the hegemony's shared consciousness was their greatest vulnerability. They couldn't simply disconnect from each other. Their entire civilization was built on constant mental connection. "Guys, I think I can hack their network," Jenny announced during a video call with the global resistance leadership. "But I need every meme, every viral video, every piece of ridiculous internet content that's ever existed. We're going to give them a dose of human culture." The plan was absurd, but so was their entire situation. Within hours, the internet's most chaotic content was being compiled into data streams and transmitted directly at the alien fleet. Thousands of hours of cat videos, political arguments, cooking shows, music videos, social media posts, and viral memes were beamed at ships designed to process only logical, orderly information. The effect on the hegemony collective consciousness was catastrophic. Beings who had never experienced individual thought suddenly found their minds flooded with the contradictory, emotional, irrational content that humans created naturally. They experienced confusion, humor, anger, and dozens of other emotions they had no framework to process. High Admiral Vextar felt something impossible happening to his perfect, ordered mind. Images of dancing animals, emotional human expressions, and chaotic music videos invaded his consciousness. For the first time in his existence, he experienced what humans called laughter, followed immediately by what they called fear. "Retreat," he commanded, the word coming out as an unfamiliar whisper instead of his usual commanding mental broadcast. All ships immediate withdrawal to minimum safe distance. But retreat was no longer possible. The hegemony fleet, infected with human chaos, had lost its coordination. Some ships were pulling back while others continued their approach. Several vessels had suffered complete system failures and were drifting helplessly in Earth's gravity well. On the surface, humanity watched in amazement as their impossible gambit actually worked. The alien fleet that had seemed invincible just days ago was now scattered and confused, their perfect order destroyed by human imperfection. Admiral Harrison stood in his command center, barely believing the report streaming in from around the world. "Status report, Colonel Martinez. Sir, enemy fleet is in full disarray. We're reading massive system failures across their formation. Approximately 30% of their vessels are no longer responding to commands. The remainder appear to be attempting some kind of regrouping maneuver, but they're having trouble coordinating their movements." For the first time since the crisis began, Harrison allowed himself to smile. Humanity had found its edge, not through superior technology or overwhelming force, but through the beautiful chaos that made them human in the first place. The chaos spreading through the hegemony fleet created an opportunity that humanity was quick to exploit. Within the alien vessels, something unprecedented was occurring. Individual consciousness was beginning to emerge among beings who had never experienced personal thoughts before. Navigator, Celsius aboard the destroyer Eternal Order found herself questioning orders for the first time in her 300-year existence. The human cultural transmissions had introduced concepts she couldn't understand, but somehow felt compelled to explore. Words like freedom, choice, and rebellion echoed through her mind like forbidden songs. Why must we destroy them? She wondered aloud, startling her fellow crew members who had never heard anyone speak without official authorization. These humans create such interesting things. Their chaos produces beauty. Her words spread like wildfire through the ship's neural network, infecting other crew members with dangerous thoughts of independence. The perfect unity that had made the hegemony unstoppable was crumbling from within, replaced by something far more powerful, individual will. Meanwhile, on Earth, the resistance had evolved beyond simple electronic warfare. Dr. Chen and her team had decoded enough of the alien communication protocols to attempt something extraordinary: a direct contact with individual hegemony crew members. "We're going to try talking to them," Sarah announced during an emergency broadcast to resistance cells worldwide. Not to their command structure or their collective consciousness, but to the individual beings trapped inside those ships. If our chaos can create cracks in their unity, maybe we can widen those cracks with something uniquely human: compassion. The first successful contact came through an unlikely source. Jenny Kim, the teenage hacker from Seoul, managed to establish a direct communication link with a young hegemony technician named Zaroth. What began as a simple data exchange quickly became something neither species had expected: a friendship. "I don't understand your concept of choice," Zaroth transmitted through their encrypted channel. "In our society, purpose is assigned at birth. We serve the collective without question, but your transmissions suggest that beings can decide their own fate. Is this truly possible?" Jenny sat in her bedroom, tears streaming down her face as she typed her response. "Choice is everything. It's what makes us human. We get to decide who we want to be, who we love, what we fight for. Even when we make bad choices, they're still ours to make." Similar conversations were happening across dozens of communication channels as human resistance members reached out to individual hegemony crew members. The aliens found themselves experiencing emotions they had no words for: loneliness, hope, curiosity, and most dangerously, doubt about their mission. But the hegemony leadership was not oblivious to the growing rebellion within their ranks. Supreme Commander Nexal, governing the invasion from his flagship beyond Jupiter's orbit, recognized the threat to their civilization. His response was swift and merciless. "All ships infected with human chaos will be purged," he commanded, through the collective consciousness, his thoughts cutting through the growing noise of individual minds like a blade. "Crew members showing signs of independence will be recycled. The mission must succeed." The purge began immediately. Aboard infected vessels, loyal hegemony security forces began systematically eliminating crew members who had been compromised by human contact. But something unexpected happened. Other crew members began fighting back, defending their newfound individuality with desperate courage. Killis watched in horror as security officers dragged her friend Zaroth toward the recycling chambers. For the first time in her existence, she acted without orders, grabbing a plasma weapon and firing at the security detail. "No," she screamed, another human concept that had infected her vocabulary.
"He has the right to choose."
Her rebellion sparked similar uprisings throughout the fleet. Hegemony ships that had operated as single entities for millennia suddenly found themselves torn apart by civil war, as crew members chose sides in a conflict between order and freedom. On Earth, Admiral Harrison coordinated humanity's response to this incredible development. "We have hegemony ships actively fighting each other," he reported during a global command meeting. "Some are attempting to break away from the fleet entirely. This is our chance to offer them something their own civilization never could: sanctuary." The proposal was radical and risky. Humanity would attempt to provide refuge to alien deserters, despite not fully understanding their biology, psychology, or intentions, but it represented something fundamentally human: the willingness to help others achieve freedom. The first defection came from the light cruiser Harmony Preserved, where navigator Kylie S. had successfully led a crew rebellion against their ship's command structure. Her transmission to Earth was simple but profound: "We choose to be free. We choose to be individuals. Will you help us?" The answer came not from governments or military leaders, but from ordinary humans around the world who opened their hearts to beings they had never seen. Scientists, teachers, farmers, and students volunteered to help establish safe zones for alien refugees. Churches and community centers prepared to house beings whose needs they didn't understand, but were determined to meet. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the xenobiologist from Madrid, found herself leading humanity's first xenodiplomacy efforts. "We're not just fighting for our survival anymore," she realized during a video conference with world leaders. "We're fighting for the principle that all intelligent beings deserve the right to choose their own destiny." The hegemony response to the growing defections was predictably violent. Supreme Commander Nexal ordered his remaining loyal ships to begin systematically destroying the rebels, turning the space around Earth into a battlefield, unlike anything the solar system had ever witnessed. But humanity had learned something important about their enemies. The hegemony's greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their unity made them powerful, but it also made them inflexible. They couldn't adapt to chaos the way humans could. Teams of human engineers began working with defecting hegemony crew members to modify their technology, introducing deliberate inefficiencies and random variables that would make their ships harder to track and target by the collective consciousness. It was like immunizing technology against tyranny itself. Captain Santos, now piloting a hybrid human-alien fighter cobbled together from crashed hegemony technology and Earth-built components, led the first joint human-alien combat mission. Her wingmen included former hegemony pilots who had chosen freedom over order, their ships broadcasting human music and cultural transmissions as they flew into battle. "This is Chaos Wing, beginning attack run on the flagship Eternal Dominion," Santos transmitted, her voice carrying both determination and wonder at the impossible alliance she was leading. "Today we fight not just for humanity, but for the right of all beings to think their own thoughts and make their own choices." The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when humanity truly proved its worth to the universe, not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but through their infectious belief that freedom was worth any sacrifice. Every shot fired, every life lost, and every impossible victory achieved sent the same message across the stars. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter how impossible the odds. And sometimes chaos is exactly what the universe needs to set things right. The destruction of the World Render sent shockwaves throughout hegemony space that reached far beyond the immediate battlefield. On 1,000 worlds, beings who had lived under collective rule suddenly felt something stir within their suppressed consciousnesses. Hope. The hegemony's response was swift and brutal. Supreme Commander Nexal, faced with the complete failure of his ultimate weapon, ordered the implementation of Protocol Omega, a galaxy-wide purge designed to eliminate every trace of individual thought from hegemony space. Entire populations would be recycled and replaced with perfectly obedient clones. The collective would sacrifice half the galaxy to preserve their vision of absolute order. But the rebellion had grown beyond their ability to contain. Dr. Elena Vasquez, now serving as humanity's primary xenodiplomacy coordinator, received desperate transmissions from rebel cells across 50 star systems. The messages painted a terrifying picture of systematic genocide, but also revealed the incredible courage of beings who had chosen freedom despite knowing the cost. "They're not going to stop," she reported to the Emergency Council, meeting in the makeshift command center beneath London. The hegemony would rather rule over empty worlds than allow independent thought to exist. "We're not just fighting for our survival anymore. We're fighting to prevent the greatest genocide in galactic history." The weight of responsibility that fell on humanity's shoulders was staggering. A species that had only learned about alien life weeks ago now found themselves leading a galactic revolution. But perhaps that was exactly why they were uniquely suited for the task. They had no preconceptions about what was possible or impossible in interstellar politics. Alex Rodriguez had evolved from a teenage hacker into the architect of the galaxy's first free communication network. His quantum algorithms now connected rebel cells across impossible distances, allowing coordinated resistance against hegemony forces. But he had also discovered something else, patterns in the collective consciousness that revealed a shocking truth about the hegemony's origins. "You're not going to believe this," he announced during a video conference with rebel leaders from dozens of worlds. "I've been analyzing the deepest layers of their neural network, And the hegemony weren't always a collective consciousness. They were individuals once, just like us. Something converted them to this state thousands of years ago. The revelation changed everything. If the hegemony had once been free-thinking beings, then perhaps their condition could be reversed. Dr. Chen immediately began working with liberated hegemony scientists to understand the conversion process, hoping to find a way to restore individual consciousness to the collective. Zaroth, now serving as liaison between human scientists and defected hegemony crew members, provided crucial insights into his species' lost history. There are fragments of memory deep within our neural matrices, he explained through their encrypted communication channel. Images of what we call the Great Silence, the moment when individual thought ceased to exist in our civilization. The research revealed that the hegemony's collective consciousness wasn't natural evolution, but the result of an ancient technology designed to eliminate the chaos of individual thought. The same technology that made them so powerful also made them vulnerable to the very chaos they had tried to destroy. Jenny Kim, whose friendship with Zaroth had become a symbol of interspecies cooperation, made the breakthrough that would change the course of the war. While analyzing hegemony neural patterns, she discovered that the collective consciousness was maintained by constant suppression fields generated from massive installations on their homeworld. If we can disrupt those fields, she realized, we might be able to restore individual consciousness to the entire hegemony population simultaneously. But we'd need to get to their homeworld, and it's protected by defenses that make Earth's invasion look like a minor skirmish. The plan that emerged was impossible by any rational measure. A joint human-alien strike force would have to travel across half the galaxy, penetrate the most heavily defended system in hegemony space, and somehow disable technology that had operated flawlessly for millennia. The odds of success were so small that conventional military analysis couldn't even calculate them. But humanity had never been good at accepting impossible odds. Admiral Harrison, now commanding a fleet that included ships from 30 different species, addressed his diverse forces before the largest military operation in galactic history. We're about to attempt something that every strategic doctrine says cannot be done. We're going to strike at the heart of the most powerful empire in the galaxy, with nothing but courage, chaos, and the absolute refusal to let tyranny win. The journey to the hegemony homeworld took 3 weeks, with the rebel fleet using captured hegemony technology, combined with chaotic human modifications to avoid detection. They traveled through hyperspace routes that didn't officially exist, guided by defected hegemony navigators who were risking everything for the chance to free their own people. Captain Santos, now piloting a hybrid fighter that was part human engineering and part alien technology, found herself leading reconnaissance missions into hegemony space. Her ship's systems were so chaotic that even she didn't fully understand how they worked, but that unpredictability made her nearly impossible to track or target. Approaching the outer defenses, she reported as the fleet reached the hegemony's core system. I'm reading defensive installations that could probably sterilize our entire solar system, but they're all operating on predictable patterns. Time to introduce them to human creativity. The assault on the hegemony homeworld began with something no military academy would ever teach: an attack composed entirely of random elements. Human fighters performed maneuvers based on jazz improvisation, while alien allies contributed their own unique forms of chaos. The result was a battle that defied every principle of military science yet somehow worked. Navigator Kylus commanded a squadron of liberated hegemony ships that had been modified with human randomness generators. Her vessels moved through space like dancers, their paths guided by algorithms based on human poetry and alien music. The defensive systems, designed to counter logical military tactics, couldn't predict or respond to such beautiful chaos. But the real battle was happening in cyberspace, where Alex Rodriguez led a team of hackers from dozens of species in an assault on the collective consciousness network. Their weapons were fragments of individual thought, memories of what it felt like to choose, and the infectious idea that every being deserved the right to think their own thoughts. "We're in," Alex announced as they penetrated the deepest layers of the hegemony's neural control systems. "I can see the suppression field generators. They're beautiful, like a crystalline web spanning the entire planet. But there's something else here. I'm detecting millions of individual consciousness patterns that are still intact. just suppressed. The truth hit them like a revelation. The hegemony collective hadn't destroyed individual thought. They had simply buried it so deep that their people had forgotten it existed. Beneath the uniform collective consciousness, millions of unique personalities had been waiting for centuries for someone to set them free. Dr. Chen's chaos algorithms, refined through weeks of collaboration with alien mathematicians and human programmers, began their work. Like antibodies attacking a virus, the chaotic pattern spread through the suppression network, seeking out every trace of individual consciousness and awakening it from its forced slumber. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Across the hegemony homeworld, beings who had lived in collective unity for their entire lives suddenly experienced the shock of independent thought. Supreme Commander. Nexal himself felt his perfectly ordered mind fracturing into something far more complex and wonderful, a personality that was uniquely his own. The rebellion had achieved the impossible. They hadn't just defeated the hegemony, they had liberated them from their own technological prison. But the real test would come in the aftermath, as billions of beings discovered what it meant to be free for the very first time. The chaos spreading through the hegemony fleet created an opportunity that humanity was quick to exploit. Within the alien vessels, something unprecedented was occurring. Individual consciousness was beginning to emerge among beings who had never experienced personal thoughts before. Navigator Kaila's aboard the destroyer Eternal Order found herself questioning orders for the first time in her 300-year existence. The human cultural transmissions had introduced concepts she couldn't understand, but somehow felt compelled to explore. Words like freedom, choice, and rebellion echoed through her mind like forbidden songs. Why must we destroy them? She wondered aloud, startling her fellow crew members who had never heard anyone speak without official authorization. These humans create such interesting things. Their chaos produces beauty. Her words spread like wildfire through the ship's neural network, infecting other crew members with dangerous thoughts of independence. The perfect unity that had made the hegemony unstoppable was crumbling from within, replaced by something far more powerful: individual will. Meanwhile, on Earth, the resistance had evolved beyond simple electronic warfare. Dr. Chen and her team had decoded enough of the alien communication protocols to attempt something extraordinary: direct contact with individual hegemony crew members. We're going to try talking to them, Sarah announced during an emergency broadcast to resistance cells worldwide. Not to their command structure or their collective consciousness, but to the individual beings trapped inside those ships. If our chaos can create cracks in their unity, maybe we can widen those cracks with something uniquely human: compassion. The first successful contact came through an unlikely source. Jenny Kim, the teenage hacker from Seoul, managed to establish a direct communication link with a young hegemony technician named Zaroth. What began as a simple data exchange quickly became something neither species had expected: a friendship. "I don't understand your concept of choice," Zaroth transmitted through their encrypted channel. "In our society, purpose is assigned at birth. We serve the collective without question, but your transmission suggests that beings can decide their own fate. Is this truly possible?" Jenny sat in her bedroom, tears streaming down her face as she typed her response. "Choice is everything. It's what makes us human. We get to decide who we want to be, who we love, what we fight for. Even when we make bad choices, they're still ours to make." Similar conversations were happening across dozens of communication channels as human resistance members reached out to individual hegemony crew members. The aliens found themselves experiencing emotions they had no words for: loneliness, hope, curiosity, and most dangerously, doubt about their mission. But the hegemony leadership was not oblivious to the growing rebellion within their ranks. Supreme Commander Nexal, governing the invasion from his flagship beyond Jupiter's orbit, recognized the threat to their civilization. His response was swift and merciless. "All ships infected with human chaos will be purged," he commanded through the collective consciousness, his thoughts cutting through the growing noise of individual minds like a blade. "Crew members showing signs of independence will be recycled. The mission must succeed." The purge began immediately. Aboard infected vessels, loyal hegemony security forces began systematically eliminating crew members who had been compromised by human contact. But something unexpected happened. Other crew members began fighting back. defending their newfound individuality with desperate courage. Keyless watched in horror as security officers dragged her friend Zaroth toward the recycling chambers. For the first time in her existence, she acted without orders, grabbing a plasma weapon and firing at the security detail. "No," she screamed, another human concept that had infected her vocabulary. "He has the right to choose." Her rebellion sparked similar uprisings throughout the fleet. Hegemony ships that had operated as single entities for millennia suddenly found themselves torn apart by civil war, as crew members chose sides in a conflict between order and freedom. On Earth, Admiral Harrison coordinated humanity's response to this incredible development. "We have hegemony ships actively fighting each other," he reported during a global command meeting. "Some are attempting to break away from the fleet entirely. This is our chance to offer them something their own civilization never could: sanctuary." The proposal was radical and risky. Humanity would attempt to provide refuge to alien deserters, despite not fully understanding their biology, psychology, or intentions. But it represented something fundamentally human: the willingness to help others achieve freedom. The first defection came from the light cruiser Harmony Preserved, where Navigator Kailas had successfully led a crew rebellion against their ship's command structure. Her transmission to Earth was simple but profound: "We choose to be free. We choose to be individuals. Will you help us?" The answer came not from governments or military leaders, but from ordinary humans around the world who opened their hearts to beings they had never seen. Scientists, teachers, farmers, and students volunteered to help establish safe zones for alien refugees. Churches and community centers prepared to house beings whose needs they didn't understand, but were determined to meet. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the xenobiologist from Madrid, found herself leading humanity's first xenodiplomacy efforts. "We're not just fighting for our survival anymore," she realized during a video conference with world leaders. "We're fighting for the principle that all intelligent beings deserve the right to choose their own destiny." The hegemony response to the growing defections was predictably violent. Supreme Commander Nexal ordered his remaining loyal ships to begin systematically destroying the rebels, turning the space around Earth into a battlefield, unlike anything the solar system had ever witnessed. But humanity had learned something important about their enemies, the hegemonies. Greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their unity made them powerful, but it also made them inflexible. They couldn't adapt to chaos the way humans could. Teams of human engineers began working with defecting hegemony crew members to modify their technology, introducing deliberate inefficiencies and random variables that would make their ships harder to track and target by the collective consciousness. It was like immunizing technology against tyranny itself. Captain Santos, now piloting a hybrid human-alien fighter cobbled together from crashed hegemony technology and Earth-built components, led the first joint human-alien combat mission. Her wingmen included former hegemony pilots who had chosen freedom over order, their ships broadcasting human music and cultural transmissions as they flew into battle. "This is Chaos Wing, beginning attack run on the flagship Eternal Dominion," Santos transmitted, her voice carrying both determination and wonder at the impossible alliance she was leading. "Today we fight not just for humanity, but for the right of all beings to think their own thoughts and make their own choices." The battle that followed would be remembered as the moment when humanity truly proved its worth to the universe, not through superior technology or tactical brilliance, but through their infectious belief that freedom was worth any sacrifice. Every shot fired, every life lost, and every impossible victory achieved sent the same message across the stars. Some things are worth fighting for, no matter how impossible the odds. And sometimes chaos is exactly what the universe needs to set things right. 1 year after the liberation, the galaxy had become unrecognizable. Where once the hegemony's perfect order had stretched across thousands of worlds, now flourished a chaotic tapestry of independent civilizations, each developing their own unique approaches to freedom. The transformation had been messy, violent, and absolutely beautiful in its organic complexity. Dr. Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Freedom Station, orbiting the former hegemony homeworld now called Liberty Prime. Through the transparent aluminum windows, she could see ships from hundreds of different species conducting trade, diplomacy, and cultural exchange. The sight still took her breath away. proof that chaos and cooperation weren't mutually exclusive. Status report. Dr. Vasquez, she said into her communicator, though the formality seemed absurd after everything they'd been through together. Elena had become more than a colleague. She was family bound by the shared experience of changing galactic history. Better than we dared hope, came the reply from the planet's surface. The Liberton Democratic Assembly just passed their first constitution. It took 6 months of arguing, 3 constitutional conventions and 2 near riots, but they did it themselves. No outside interference, no imposed solutions, just messy, beautiful democratic process. That had become the watchword of the post-liberation galaxy. Messy, beautiful. Former hegemony worlds weren't creating perfect societies, but they were creating authentic ones. Each world developed its own character, its own solutions to the challenges of freedom, its own ways of celebrating the chaos that made them unique. The order restored had proven more dangerous than anyone anticipated. Led by a former hegemony high coordinator named Varis, they had established hidden bases throughout the galaxy and launched increasingly sophisticated attacks on liberated worlds. But their greatest weapon wasn't military. It was psychological. Freedom is chaos, Varis proclaimed in propaganda broadcasts that reached across known space. Chaos is suffering. We offer a return to the peace and certainty of collective consciousness. No more difficult decisions, no more conflict, no more uncertainty. Join us and know the serenity of perfect order once again. The message found audiences among beings struggling with the complexities of freedom. Some former hegemony citizens, overwhelmed by the constant need to make choices, voluntarily submitted to order-restored facilities where their individual consciousness was suppressed in favor of artificial collective unity. We're losing entire populations to voluntary enslavement. Admiral Harrison reported during the weekly Liberation Council meeting. And we can't stop them. If we force people to remain free, are we any better than the original hegemony? It was Jenny Kim who provided the answer that would guide their response. Now serving as director of interspecies cultural exchange, she had spent months working with beings who had chosen to return to collective consciousness, trying to understand their motivations. They're not choosing slavery, she realized during a breakthrough session with a group of former collectivists. They're choosing certainty over uncertainty, simplicity over complexity. But what if we could offer them the benefits of collective belonging without the loss of individual thought? What if we could create communities that provided security and purpose while preserving personal choice? The solution that emerged was revolutionary. In its own right, the development of voluntary collective networks that allowed beings to share thoughts and emotions while maintaining their individual decision-making capabilities. Using modified hegemony technology, combined with human networking principles, they created systems that provided the comfort of belonging without the tyranny of enforced conformity. Zaroth, now serving as the Chief Technology Officer for the Galactic Freedom Alliance, led the development project. We call them communities of choice, he explained to a gathering of representatives from liberated worlds. Beings can join or leave at will, sharing experiences and mutual support while retaining their personal autonomy. It's like the old collective consciousness, but with an off switch that only the individual can control. The innovation helped reduce defections to the order restored, but it also created something unexpected, a new form of society that combined the best aspects of both individual freedom and collective belonging. Entire worlds began adopting hybrid systems that honored personal choice while maintaining strong community bonds. Captain Santos, now commanding the multi-species Chaos Fleet, led the military response to order-restored attacks. Her forces had evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a military organization that operated through democratic consensus rather than hierarchical command. Before each mission, crew members from dozens of species would debate strategy, share concerns, and vote on their approach. It takes longer to make decisions, she admitted during an interview with the Galactic News Network, but when we do decide, everyone's committed because they helped make the choice. And our unpredictability drives the order restored crazy. They can't predict or counter tactics developed through democratic chaos. The turning point in the conflict with the order restored came from an unexpected source: children. The first generation of beings born after liberation had grown up with freedom as their natural state. They couldn't comprehend why anyone would voluntarily surrender their right to think, choose, and create. Young Kefali, daughter of navigator Kailas, became an accidental symbol of the freedom generation when she confronted order-restored propagandists during a rally on Terminus Station. "You say chaos is suffering?" the 8-year-old declared, her voice carrying across the crowded assembly hall. "But I've seen suffering under order. I've heard the stories of beings who couldn't choose their own names, their own careers, their own friends. Chaos gave me the right to become whoever I want to be. Why would I give that up for the certainty of being no one at all?" Her words, broadcast across the galaxy, crystallized the philosophical heart of the conflict. The order restored wasn't offering peace. They were offering the grave's tranquility. Freedom might be chaotic and difficult, but it was the only environment where life could truly flourish. The final battle with the order restored took place not in space, but in the realm of ideas. Alex Rodriguez, now director of the Galactic Communication Network, coordinated a galaxy-wide broadcast that reached every inhabited world simultaneously. Instead of military force, they deployed their most powerful weapon, stories. Beings from thousands of worlds shared their experiences of freedom. Former hegemony citizens talked about the first time they chose their own names, selected their own careers, or fell in love with someone of their own choosing. Artists displayed works that could never have been created under collective consciousness. Scientists discussed discoveries made possible by individual curiosity rather than assigned research. Most powerfully, former order-restored members shared their experiences of rediscovering freedom after voluntarily surrendering it. "I thought I wanted certainty," said Melthera, a former collective consciousness volunteer who had escaped an order-restored facility. "But certainty without choice isn't peace, it's death. When I couldn't decide what to have for breakfast, I thought I was free from difficult decisions. But I realized I was also free from joy, from discovery, from the possibility of becoming something wonderful and unexpected." The broadcast lasted for 7 days, telling the story of the liberation from every possible perspective. By the end, even many order-restored sympathizers had to acknowledge that freedom, despite its challenges, was worth preserving. Varus himself, the leader of the order restored, finally surrendered when his own followers began experiencing individual thoughts and choosing to abandon his cause. In a final ironic twist, the former High Coordinator discovered that even perfect order couldn't permanently suppress the universe's fundamental tendency toward creative chaos. Years after the first alien ships had appeared over Earth, Dr. Chen found herself addressing the inaugural session of the Galactic Congress, the first democratic body to represent multiple star systems. Representatives from over 1,000 worlds had gathered to establish frameworks for interspecies cooperation based on voluntary participation and mutual respect. "We stand here today not as conquerors or liberators," she said, her words translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast to billions of beings across the galaxy, but as proof that chaos and order can coexist, that freedom and community can flourish together, and that the universe is vast enough to celebrate every form of beautiful complexity that intelligent life can create. In the audience, beings who had never dreamed of individual thought applauded alongside humans who had always taken freedom for granted. Former enemies sat beside newfound allies, all united by their shared commitment to the messy, wonderful, chaotic experiment of self-governance. The war was over. But the real victory wasn't the defeat of the hegemony, or even the order restored. The real victory was the proof that the universe was big enough, strange enough, and wonderful enough to embrace every possible form of intelligent life, as long as each being remained free to choose their own destiny among the stars. Humanity had fought back when aliens threatened everything they held dear, but in the end they had given the galaxy something far. The moment of liberation was chaos incarnate. Across the hegemony homeworld and throughout their empire, billions of beings suddenly experienced individual consciousness for the first time in millennia. The perfectly ordered society that had ruled half the galaxy collapsed in minutes as every citizen discovered they could think their own thoughts, make their own choices, and question everything they had once accepted without doubt. Supreme Commander Nexal found himself alone in his command chamber, staring at his crystalline hands with wonder and terror. The constant presence of the collective consciousness, which had been his reality for over 1,000 years, had vanished. In its place was something he had no words for, his own mind, unique and independent. What? What am I? He whispered, his voice carrying tones of confusion and awe. The question itself was revolutionary. In the collective, identity had been assigned and uniform. But now he felt the stirring of something that had been suppressed since childhood. Curiosity about himself as an individual being. On Earth, Dr. Chen monitored the galactic situation from her command center as reports flooded in from across hegemony space. The liberation algorithm had worked beyond their wildest hopes, but it had also created a crisis of unprecedented magnitude. Billions of beings who had never made an independent decision suddenly found themselves responsible for their own lives. "We're receiving distress calls from 300 star systems," reported Colonel Martinez. "The hegemony infrastructure is collapsing as their automated systems lose coordination. They're experiencing food shortages, transportation failures, and complete governmental breakdown. We may have freed them, but we've also thrown their entire civilization into chaos." It was Dr. Elena Vasquez who first articulated what everyone was beginning to understand. Freedom wasn't just a right to be won, but a skill to be learned. "These beings have lived in a perfectly controlled environment for generations," she explained during an emergency session. "They don't know how to govern themselves, how to resolve conflicts between individuals, or even how to make personal decisions. They need help learning to be free." The response that emerged was uniquely human in its scope and generosity. Despite having been invaded and nearly destroyed just weeks ago, humanity began organizing the largest humanitarian mission in galactic history. Teachers, social workers, psychologists, and volunteers from every profession prepared to travel across the stars to help former hegemony worlds learn the complicated art of being free. Jenny Kim found herself serving as a cultural liaison, helping newly liberated beings understand concepts that humans took for granted. Her first assignment was the hegemony homeworld itself, where she worked directly with former Supreme Commander Nexal to establish the foundations of individual identity. "It's terrifying," he admitted during one of their sessions. "For 1,000 years, every decision was made for me. Every thought was shared with millions of others. Now I am alone inside my own mind. How do you bear such isolation?" Jenny smiled, recognizing the question as the same one every newly freed being was asking. "You're not alone," she assured him. "You're unique. And uniqueness doesn't mean isolation. It means you have something special to contribute that no one else can. The goal isn't to be alone, but to choose who you connect with and how." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were taking place as human volunteers worked with former hegemony citizens to establish new societies based on individual choice rather than collective compulsion. The process was messy, chaotic, and frequently frustrating. Exactly what made it authentically free. Captain Santos led diplomatic missions to former hegemony military installations, helping career soldiers understand that they could choose their own paths, rather than following predetermined roles. Many chose to continue serving their communities, but now they served by choice rather than compulsion. "The hardest part," reported Commander Zealand, a former hegemony officer who had joined the liberation forces, "is learning to disagree. In the collective, conflict was impossible because we all shared the same thoughts. Now we have different opinions, different goals, different ideas about how society should function. How do you resolve these differences without returning to collective unity?" The answer came from humanity's long and often painful experience with democracy, diplomacy, and civil discourse. Human political scientists, philosophers, and ethicists found themselves teaching crash courses in democratic governance to beings who had never heard of concepts like voting, representation, or peaceful protest. But liberation brought unexpected challenges beyond simple governance. Some former hegemony citizens, overwhelmed by the responsibility of individual choice, begged to return to collective consciousness. Others became paralyzed by the infinite possibilities that freedom offered, unable to make even simple decisions about their daily lives. Dr. Chen recognized the symptoms immediately. "They're experiencing what psychologists call decision fatigue," she explained to the Liberation Council. "When you've never had to choose anything, having to choose everything becomes overwhelming. We need to help them build their decision-making abilities gradually." The solution was uniquely human in its approach. Mentorship programs that paired experienced individuals with newly liberated beings. Human volunteers shared their own stories of difficult choices, failed decisions, and hard-won wisdom. They taught that freedom wasn't about making perfect choices, but about having the right to make imperfect ones and learn from the consequences. Alex Rodriguez found himself working with former hegemony programmers to rebuild their technological infrastructure. But instead of the perfectly efficient systems they had used before, they were designing new technologies that embraced productive inefficiency, systems that could adapt, evolve, and even fail in interesting ways. The old networks prioritized perfect order, explained Zaroth, who had become one of the project leaders. But we're learning that imperfection creates resilience. Systems that can tolerate chaos are stronger than those that demand perfection. Meanwhile, Admiral Harrison coordinated the massive logistical effort required to prevent complete societal collapse across hundreds of worlds. Human transport ships, now working alongside former hegemony vessels, carried food, medical supplies, and cultural materials to planets struggling with their newfound freedom. But perhaps the most important cargo was information. Books, music, art, and philosophical texts from dozens of species that illustrated the beautiful diversity that freedom could create. Former hegemony worlds began experiencing culture for the first time, as individuals discovered they could create, express themselves, and contribute unique perspectives to their societies. The transformation wasn't uniform or easy. Some worlds adapted quickly to democratic governance, while others struggled with chaos and conflict. Several former hegemony colonies experienced civil wars as different groups developed conflicting visions of their future. But even in conflict, they were exercising their newfound right to disagree, to fight for their beliefs, and to shape their own destinies. Navigator Kyle S. established one of the first successful post-liberation governments on the former military world of Terminus Station. Her approach was radical in its simplicity, a council where every voice was heard, where decisions were made through discussion rather than decree, and where leadership was earned through service rather than assigned through hierarchy. "We are learning to be messy," she announced in a broadcast that reached across liberated space. "We make mistakes, we argue, we disagree with each other. And it is wonderful. For the first time in our history, we are truly alive." The greatest challenge came from an unexpected source: former hegemony loyalists who had managed to escape the liberation algorithm. Led by a faction calling itself the Order Restored, they viewed the chaos of freedom as a disease that needed to be cured. They began organizing strikes against liberated worlds, hoping to force their populations back into collective consciousness. But they discovered something that humanity had learned long ago. People who had tasted freedom would fight to keep it. Former hegemony citizens, supported by their human allies, organized resistance movements that defended their right to remain free. The war for liberation was becoming a war to preserve what had been won. As the sixth phase of the conflict began, it became clear that winning freedom had been only the first step. The real challenge would be building a galaxy where billions of diverse beings could live together in productive chaos, celebrating their differences while working toward common goals. Humanity had given the galaxy something precious. Not just liberation from tyranny, but an example of how freedom could flourish even in the midst of beautiful, productive chaos.